with squad 320 and 830, because we're the last ones there. So as we're trying to figure out what's going to happen next, because this is 320's call, it's their call what they want to do with the vehicle. We're just backing up. So 320, I guess Officer King said that at some point, well, I guess let me backtrack a little bit here. As I'm trying to figure out with Chang what we're going to do, we just kind of stood by, and then the fire department shows up. At that time, I don't know what the status of Floyd is. The fire department shows up, and they ask us what do we need, and I'm like, I'm kind of baffled, like we just needed an ambulance. I don't know what you guys are here for. I assumed that was unrelated to us, maybe with a medical inside to cut food or something, because the fire department went inside to go check. As they're checking, dispatch asks us, tells us that the fire department is looking for the ambulance. So I walked up to the fire engine and told the driver, the driver, I believe, like, hey, the dispatch says you guys need to go to 36 and Park. They're doing CPR. And that's when the fire guys come back. I kind of tell them the same thing. And they end up getting back on, and then heading to 36 and Park to assist with the ambulance. I end up going back to the Officer Chang, and he ends up clearing his. I tell him, hey, I basically. It looks like this guy is being worked on, so this could potentially be a critical incident if he dies. I don't know his status, but they're doing CPR. So just make sure to do a report if anything comes, supplement or whatever. If anything changes, I'll let you know. I think he takes off. Lane, I think later on, I believe he went to ambulance with. Went in the ambulance with Floyd. So it left Officer King there with us. And then we're trying. I guess we talked to him about what you wanted to do with the vehicle. Or actually, he's telling us that. So he started proceeding to tell me, like, kind of like, this vehicle is legally parked. We're just gonna take the keys for safekeeping and leave it here. But I stop him, and I don't. And this is more maybe attributed to his lack of experience. I don't think he realized the gravity of the situation, potential situation. So I tell him, no, we're not. We're not gonna leave the scene. You need to call the sergeant, notify them of what's happening. We need to hold the scene, especially the vehicle, because it could potentially be evidence of this whole incident. So he ends up. I don't remember. I think Officer Chavin might have been the one that called. I don't recall off. We've been one of those two. Sergeant Pluger, and he arrives on scene. I believe Officer King fills him in on what occurred.
What happens from there?
Sergeant Pluger said that he needed to go check on the status of Floyd, and me and Officer Shavner, to go with him up there. And at this time, Lane gets a ride back with the fire department and dropped off. So they're instructed to stay with the vehicle at the scene and hold the scene for as potential crime scene until we know the status of Floyd. Me and Officer Chauvin end up heading up to HCMC to meet with Sergeant Pluger at HCMC, check on the status of Floyd.
What did you learn?
Through the entirety of our HCMC, we just stood out of the we were out in the hallway. About maybe we were probably there 5-10 minutes. And I believe a doctor comes out and informs us that Floyd was pronounced dead. I left out of the ambulance bay, and we stood by the ambulance bay. I guess Sergeant Bluger was probably talking to the watch commanders or informing them.
Okay. And what did you and Officer Chauvin do?
We stood out just waiting for our next instruction.
Did you receive some instruction?
Yes, to wait for our escort officers.
Okay. Okay. And what does that mean?
When officers in Minneapolis get into a critical incident, there's kind of a mechanism where the department has a escort officer, where both officer, everyone's separated, and has a escort officer come and wait with us and transport us to City Hall.
Who was your escort officer?
I believe it was Sergeant Muhammad. Excuse me.
Sergeant Muhammad?
Yeah.
Where did he take you?
City Hall.
Anywhere specific in City Hall?
I believe it was I want to say room 100.
Okay. And then you remained there for some amount of time?
Yes.
Okay. Is it okay if we just clarify some things?
Sure.
You can. Yeah. Okay. So Cup Foods at 38th in Chicago. You mentioned having some experience at Cup Foods. Can you elaborate on that? What kind of calls over your time in the 3rd Precinct have you had at Cup Foods?
A lot of shots fired, fights. I think I might have picked up maybe a couple of people there on warrants.
On warrants, you said?
Correct.
Okay. The call that 320 was on, that was you said a forgery call?
Correct.
Was there any mention of violence or weapons in that call that you recall?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall like the essence of what the complaint was?
I believe it was somebody passed fake. I think the remarks somebody tried to pass fake bill.
Okay.
The person was appeared possibly intoxicated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you had experience with counterfeit money being passed at businesses?
Yes.
Okay. How would you typically handle if that was all you knew? How would you handle that?
What do you mean?
Let's say the call is exactly what you said. Somebody passed a fake $20 bill in our store and appeared intoxicated. How would you have handled that? Or how would you typically handle a call like that?
if we have a suspect, I guess they would be detained. And obviously we get more backstory. While being detained, we'd probably get more of a backstory from the store. And then verify if it was actually a fake bill or not.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay. It's a fairly common call?
I would say it's a rarity to have a suspect with forgery to actually be still there.
They don't stick around, no?
Generally not.
Okay. But was the information that you recalled that there was a suspect on scene, or was the call just that the person who passed the bill seemed to be intoxicated?
I believe in the remarks they had mentioned a vehicle.
Okay.
That was parked across the street. So
that would be unusual in your experience to have a suspect in a forgery or a counterfeit bill still be on scene.
Correct.
Okay. When you guys get there, when I say you guys, I mean you and Officer Chauvin get there. You first see Officer Chang, who then points to Officers Lane and King. You describe seeing Mr. Floyd resisting. Can you just elaborate on that and describe more specifically what you saw him doing?
He was in handcuffs, kind of stiffen up his body.
Okay.
Where, in order for somebody to kind of sit in the squad car, especially a big person like him, you need their cooperation as far as bending their knees.
Okay.
And because it could be tight back there, especially for a big person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have some level of cooperation from the suspect, it's going to be extremely tough, especially if he won't bend his knee.
Okay.
And he's a bigger guy. I think they asked several times to sit down, sit in the squad car, and he's not following. He's refusing to sit.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned he was saying he's claustrophobic. What else was he saying?
That he didn't want. I think he would say he wanted to talk or something like that.
Okay.
But he was instructed to sit in the squad car.
Do you know what the urgency was to get him in the squad car?
No.
Do you know if he was formally under arrest?
No, we're acting good faith. So
as far as you knew, they wanted to get him in the squad.
Yep, backing officers.
Okay. Have you had experience with people going under the influence?
Yes.
Okay. Because you described that you felt that he maybe was under the influence.
Correct.
All right. Is it, in your experience, has it been common, or is it common that people who are under the influence are sometimes hard to rationalize with?
Yes.
Did you see any, or at the time there, have any thoughts about maybe an alternative way to handle this, being a little more veteran officer?
First, it wasn't our call. We're just a backup officer, so we don't. I don't have back information as far as
Sure.
what happened prior to us arriving.
But you're seeing what you're seeing right there in front of you.
Yep.
And obviously what the rookie officers are doing isn't working. Did you make any suggestions about maybe an alternative to trying to get him in the car?
Later on.
Later on. But what about prior to getting him in the car?
No.
Okay. Did you actually physically assist trying to put him in the car?
No, I never.
You weren't able to get a hold of him?
I don't recall ever touching him.
Okay. All right. But you went around to the passenger side where Officer Lane was. Do I have that correct?
At some point, yes.
At some point. But then he had already kind of, I think you said, fling. He flinged himself out of the car?
Yep.
What did he do to fling? How did he do that?
So it's kind of like he scooped himself and then kind of with his foot pushed himself out against some side of the squad.
Okay, pushed himself out and then kind of...
From my view, that's what I saw.
Okay, and then came out of the car. And then you made the suggestion to put him on the ground.
And so they try again to do the same thing again.
What do you mean?
try to get him to sit in the squad car.
Oh, okay.
But from that side, and at that time, I'm like, all right, guys, it's pointless to do this. Let's put him on the ground.
Was there ever any discussion or suggestion that maybe we just talk to him and see what the problem is?
I would assume they probably.
What about from you, though?
Okay.
I mean, did you make that suggestion or try to do that?
I was not the contact officer, so I did not attempt to do that.
Understood. Okay. So you went through you said the 40-hour CIT, crisis intervention training.
Yes.
From your experience, have you used that on the street?
Yes.
Those techniques that you learned in that crisis intervention training. Was there anything about this call that suggested to you maybe this might be a good use of those skills as a crisis intervention officer?
I'd say it doesn't hurt to try.
Did you try?
I did not try. I was not the contact officer, so.
What? I mean, why does that matter?
I don't have much of a, I guess, because I would like just kind of backtrack a little bit here. I don't know what happened prior to it.
Okay.
I guess the only attempt you could say is, just kind of tell him to relax.
Okay. Did you do that?
I did.
Okay. How did he respond to that?
He didn't respond at all.
Okay.
He was still kind of in a manic stage, I guess.
It seems you use the word pointless. That what the officers were doing seemed to be pointless.
At that point, it was. We've already spent several minutes trying to get in the squad car from the rear driver's side.
Do you know how many minutes you actually were spending by the time you got there? I know you don't know what was happening prior, but
Right.
when you got there, about how many minutes?
I wasn't counting.
Rough estimate? Did it seem like several or a couple, or what do you think?
Maybe a couple minutes, roughly.
Okay. What was the purpose of calling for the ambulance?
I felt that that he was likely gonna that he was possibly on drugs.
Okay.
Just the way he was acting, erratic behavior, and we wouldn't be, even if we wanted to transport him, we wouldn't be able to transport him the way he was acting.
Okay, so what was the hope that the ambulance or paramedics could do for you?
At least assess them and figure out what we're going to do from there.
Okay, even though he's struggling with you guys?
Yes.
What could they do to help with a struggling person?
They can restrain him better.
Better?
Yep.
Okay.
Why don't you elaborate on that?
So instead of being handcuffs, usually when we deal with people that are kind of excited, delirium, or on high on something, and have and they're out of control, we would assist with holding them down, just putting them on the ambulance gurney there, and usually what they'll do is handcuff him, their own handcuffs, and handcuff that person to the gurney.
Does that help calm people down?
It restrained them until paramedics can kind of assess what they need to go from there.
Okay. You mentioned just a second ago excited delirium, I think you said, correct? What is that, as far as you understand?
I guess it could be a mental health or more than likely drug related, where they go on a high, like extreme high, and they're acting erratic, they're not making sense, kind of generally, from my experience, sweating profusely. You're unable to reason with them at all. They don't really have any self-awareness, and potentially very explosive and violent. If they have like drugs in their system, they kind of have that that superhuman strength
Okay.
with if there's drugs on board.
Could excited delirium also potentially be fatal to a person?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you learn, like, how do you know this about excited delirium?
We learned it through well, this is part of being licensed is you go through the Minnesota Post Board curriculum there. That's where it initially was taught about that, and then there's further training with MPD.
Does, in your understanding of excited delirium, does struggling or fighting with, let's say, officers have any role in exacerbating excited delirium or making that worse?
I think that's kind of out of his scope of knowledge.
Okay.
And you're asking questions like he's a medical person.
Well, I think
If you have a question about his training, I'd ask you.
that is a training question, I would say.
Well, you didn't ask it that way.
In your training on excited delirium, have you heard or learned any information about the role a struggle has with excited delirium?
I think I've read it before.
Okay. Was there a concern at the scene about excited delirium?
I would say, for me, it was, at the time, it was more like a drug-related, potentially, like possibly like consuming drugs before like officers.
Okay. Did you hear Officer Lane specifically say he was concerned about excited delirium?
I did not.
Okay. Did you think that Mr. Floyd was perhaps having a drug overdose? Is that what you're trying to say?
It's a possibility.
Possibility.
In my mind, it was a possibility.
Does that change in any way the way officers would, in your experience and training, officers would respond to somebody?
I guess it really depends if they have knowledge of it or not.
Okay. What were some of the things that Mr. Floyd was saying when he was on the ground being restrained that you heard?
He was saying that that you couldn't breathe, but then he was obviously yelling and talking.
What does that mean?
Obviously, we're in school. We're trained like, hey, if suspects claiming that they can't breathe, if they're talking, they're breathing. Obviously, you got to be able to breathe in order to say so.
Okay.
It's no different than I guess getting a foot chase somebody and they're exhausted and we're exhausted and obviously we're taking a lot of breaths and it feels like we're not breathing,
Okay.
able to breathe.
From where you were standing, where were other officers positioned on Mr. Floyd?
I believe Chauvin was at the head of the Floyd. I believe Chang was in the middle and torso, and Lane was at the foot.
Did you say Chang?
Excuse me, clarify. King.
Oh, King. Okay. Because Officer Chang is the park officer, but
correct.
the other. Okay.
Do you know the spelling on Officer King's name versus Chang, just so they can understand it?
I believe you already have.
So Chang is C-H-A-N-G?
Yeah.
And Kang is K-U-E-N-G? Something like that? That's how I understand it, at least.
Yeah, kind of a newer guy. So
Kang and Chang.
I couldn't tell you how to spell it correctly.
But just so it's clear, Officer Chauvin, Officer Kang, and then Officer Lane at the feet.
Yes.
Did I have that right? Okay. Who are you closest to in this kind of chain of or group of officers?
Chauvin.
What did you see Officer Chauvin doing?
He's struggling with the guy because he's kind of moving a little bit, squirreling around.
Okay.
I think at some point I asked the guy, what you on, meaning what drugs are you using? Because I know I am with Sunway, and generally
Want to know?
they'd like to know
Sure.
that information. He didn't respond. So
Okay. How was Officer Chauvin getting control of Mr. Floyd?
I can't see what he's doing with his arms or anything like that because I'm kind of offset him a little bit. Because from my first initial view of it, it's kind of his knees are moving, depending on like the suspect. It's moving between the back of the back of the head, neck, shoulder blade.
Which knee?
I believe it's a left knee.
Left knee? Okay. Do you know, have you seen that or used a maneuver similar to that?
No.
Are you trained to handcuff people?
Yes.
Is that something you have to refresh on every year with your use of force
Yes.
training? Okay. How many different ways are there to handcuff people?
Lots of ways.
Can you think of like 3 off the top of your head that you're probably trained in every year?
This is over, under.
How about the position of the person you're trying to arrest or handcuff?
Well, it usually could do as far as practice. They'll be standing on their knees and on their stomach.
Prone, I think
Yeah,
they call
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay. And so you've trained in how to handcuff somebody prone. Do you use your knee when you're typically trying to handcuff somebody in a prone position?
I've seen trainers teach use the knee to kind of leverage yourself.
Is that how you're trained though? To do a prone handcuffing technique, to put your knee, to use your knee to help handcuff a person?
What do you mean here? Could you elaborate?
Well, are you trained to, have you been trained by the Minneapolis Police Department to handcuff somebody in a prone position?
Yes.
Do you utilize the knees to effectuate that handcuffing?
I guess there's a specific technique where they teach where you have where you have the person's arms between their knees.
Right. Okay. So was what Officer Chauvin doing similar or different to what you would normally do if you're trying to prone handcuff somebody?
Floyd was already handcuffed, so.
Right. Okay. So that maneuver that you saw Officer Chauvin use, is that something you've been trained in?
I've never used it.
Have you ever seen Officer Chauvin do that before in calls?
I don't recall.
Have you ever done that on a call?
I've never done that.
Okay. Did you see his knee on Officer? I'm sorry. Did you see Officer Chauvin's knee on Mr. Floyd's neck?
At some point, yes.
At some point. Okay. Was it constantly there, or did it move around, or something else?
From what I can, because I'm it's majority of my attention is focused on traffic. I'm not always looking down at what they're doing. I'm trusting them to do what they do, what they're doing, and they're kind of trusting me to kind of watch their back.
Yeah.
So I'm spending the majority of my time looking out at traffic and the crowd.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that.
Yep.
So you're not constantly
I'm not sitting
watching,
there,
but you are looking back just to make sure everything's
Right.
looking back and forth, it sounds like?
Right.
Okay. The hobble. What was, so the purpose of the hobble was what?
To restrain a person, a fighting person that is in handcuffs.
Okay. And what part of the body are you trying to restrain if you've got him handcuffed?
Generally, their foot to waist.
Okay. Was he somehow using his feet that they needed to be hobbled, in your opinion?
I believe I saw Officer Lane kind of struggle with getting control of Floyd at the leg. So that's why I wanted to get to prevent either of us getting hurt or Lane getting hurt or getting kicked.
Yeah. Did the hobble ever get applied?
I don't believe so.
Do you know?
I think.